Welcome back to the Zero E Michigan podcast. I'm Carl Bloss, and my co-host is
Larry Hudson.
today. I wanted to give a shout out to my EV colleague Yanik Dhont in the Kansas City area. He created a new Facebook group recently called EV Zen, and he wanted to keep it all about positivity. Let's not have any discussions about tips and tricks and this sort of thing. Let's just focus on the fun stuff. And I think we all need a little more joy in my life. So I thought let's do the same thing. And I had an experience last week where I was helping somebody with their brand new Mach-E, and they were struggling a little bit for a regional road trip. And then I helped them out. They did all the right things. They got plugged in, and they're like, "Wow, this is so cool!" And just while we were standing there talking at the charger, the car went from 25 to 45 to 50%. We were still chatting away. He's like, "Oh, I've already got enough." And it's like, "This is so cool. I can do this." Right. And so I was like, and I drove away from that event just feeling this glow, like, you help somebody. With that in mind, Larry, what gives you joy in the
Yeah,
EV world?
Robert Llewellyn again. I really like his podcast. And he had a gal on. And what they talked about is if you're getting your information from just turn on TV, turn on the radio, these kind of lazy ways, you're being misinformed most likely. You really have to dig into the data. And so she just went on for like 2 hours of all the positive things that is happening, that we are getting a lot more solar than we realize. It's growing a lot faster than we expect. Battery cycling is really starting to kick in. Like all those batteries out of the bolts, they're stacking them in these little sheds and able to use them on solar farms. And so they're being used. Anyways, and then like phone company Apple has got a really neat program where they're going to start really stepping up the recycling of their old phones, and it really adds up. So she just had several hours of positive things that are happening on. And again, unfortunately, you got to dig for the data.
If it bleeds,
Yeah,
it leads. So that's
yeah,
you're going to see the negative stuff.
yeah. And so, anyways, just being positive. And I agree, like Carl said, and and so you feel good, but also this electric thing really does work well. It's super efficient, super practical. And man, once you figure out that plugging in language, it says so much better. The One of the things that I didn't expect to like so much was the quiet. No vibration, no nothing, just this peace and quiet. It's
Yeah.
just so nice. Zen.
Right.
Good.
We forget that sometimes. I recently had the opportunity, I had to help a friend out move their ice car, and I had to drive it on the highway for probably a good 20 minutes. And it was just like, oh man, the acceleration isn't
Uh,
that great. And, it was
yeah.
a late model car. So, it was pretty decent acceleration wise. Like, oh, I'm feeling it shift and I'm hearing this buzz. And oh, by the way, knowing what I know about ice engines, I think I hear a pinhole leak in the exhaust. And I'm thinking, oh man, I'm so glad that's one more thing that I don't have to do on my
Right.
vehicle is take care of that kind of stuff. And then, with that in mind, I get back in an EV or for those on the video version, I have a picture of my Zero SRS behind me, electric motorcycle, and it's just an absolute joy to ride. I mean, 0 to 60 and stupid quick. There's no transmission. And I know some people, I used to have a Porsche Boxster and I liked rowing through the gears. I get that. And the exhaust note. But I have to say, if I'm just kind of weaving through the countryside, then I personally don't need any of that stuff. I enjoy the quiet. I notice I see a lot more wildlife because they're not scared away from my engine. And yeah, the bike's got
And
enough range.
the fumes, right?
Yeah, I don't smell
Man,
anything. I
yeah,
don't
the
feel
fumes
the
are really offensive.
yeah.
It's Now that I've driven the plugged in, it's like being around smokers. You remember when it used to be you could smoke in restaurants? My dad smoked in the house, and so he just was used to it. Then all of a sudden they started passing all the rules, no smoking, and they're like, "What's the big deal?" And then all of a sudden you finally get to experience what it's like not to be around smoke for a day, a week. You start realizing,
Yeah.
wow. And I think it's the same thing with the fumes. You don't know because you're just fumigated 24/7. And then
Yeah.
all of a sudden you have this experience with electric car, and you can go weeks without smelling the fumes at a gas station and the fumes from the exhaust and the heat, and man, you're just like, wow, this is great.
Yeah, I agree.
I think those are subtle things, right? We don't really realize, but it's powerful.
We talked about helping people, and I had a few more examples, but I don't want to overstate it. But it's really nice to help people, obviously. But the other thing I've noticed is I see a lot more diversity in the EV community. We're both
Right.
white guys, but I think we're seeing a lot more females. We're seeing more people of color, and just a cross section of society. And I walked through the Tesla event, and I looked around and I thought, wow, this is a cross segment of America, and I really think that's great.
When I got my plug-in car, like right out of the gate, all of a sudden I'm on the board of the CV thing. So we're getting together almost every other weekend for something. And I'm getting to hang out with Paul Pincella, who's the head physicist at Western. And then I first heard of Carl because Carl interviewed Paul back, what would be that, 7 years ago, maybe? You were doing
Yeah,
a radio station, right?
it was the WKTV podcast, which unfortunately we had to give up because we lost the sound engineer.
Right. So that's how I first heard about Carl, and then I reached out with him, stayed in touch, and that's kind of how I'm a fan of YouTube. And I mentioned to Carl, I was like, man, I remember you were doing that, so cool. And like you just said, you guys lost your sound engineer, so that's how we come up with the YouTube. Again, joy, right?
Yeah.
We have a lot of fun with this. The people, Carl comes up with the questions. Like when we did the gal, I was so cool that you found out that back when cars were first made, that women would only drive the electric versions.
Well, they wouldn't.
It,
It was, back in the day, people were typecast, right? It's like, oh, men, big, strong, burly, they can handle the hand crank. The women are more frail. That was the thought process in the time. They're going to do better with electrics. So that's kind of how people were pigeonholed back in the day.
was it like 30% of the cars were electric back when they first came out? Is that a number I
I don't
heard the
know
other
the
day?
statistics, but it was more prevalent than I think we think today, because
Yeah.
you see, at the Cartier Mansion, the bed and breakfast up in Ludington, they have a room that's dedicated to electric and Edison and all this sort of thing. And one of the things they have on the wall is a map of Chicago with charging stations from, like, I don't know, 1917, 1918, something like that. I hope I'm getting the year right.
Wow.
They were all DC, right? They're DC fast chargers, if you will. And they showed you all the chargers in the area, and there are a lot. It's pretty amazing.
Wow. Yeah, that's not bringing much joy to think that what could have been. So let's switch channels.
Yeah.
That's unfortunate.
Yeah.
But cool. Anyways, doing the podcast, it's just been a lot of fun. The people we get to talk to,
Yeah.
really, I always get so jazzed. So I'm really glad that you're willing to do this, take the time, talk about joy.
Yeah. So what do you guys think? What brings you joy? Put it down in the comments below, and we'll chat about it. So thanks for being with us, and we'll catch you next
Have a
time.
good one.
If you enjoyed or learned from this episode of Zero E Michigan, please subscribe to us on your favorite podcast platform. Visit our YouTube channel for other related videos at youtube.com/@0E-Michigan.